Yeah, and then what was it? Last Thursday, we released our Player of the Year. We ended up going with Quinn Chambeau, and I know that was kind of a tough decision for us to make because it's obviously a huge honor, and we want to try and get it right. Um, and there were a ton of names that were in the mix that had really good numbers, really big years that were definitely up for consideration. So I don't know if you guys want to kind of get into that or mention any names or however you want to go about it. But I know it was a tough choice for us, but we ultimately landed on Shambo.
Yeah, I could definitely start here. I mean, first off, like Quinn Shambo definitely deserved the award, at least in our minds. Talking through it, like he's been, one of the top catchers in the state for the last 3 years, and all around too. When you factor in what he does with the bat, but then defensively, it's as good as I've seen in the last 10, however many years I've been doing this. It's elite behind the plate. He impacts the game every single inning, every single pitch, that he's playing with what he does behind the plate. He limits the running game. He also will throw behind runners and pick up outs and steal outs, and let alone just what he does for his pitch presentation and handling the arms. And I think that's really, for us, talking through it, looking at what Libertyville did on the mound this year, not just one guy, because Josh Holst, I mean, absolutely incredible year. His numbers speak for themselves. He was a first team All Stater. Pitched in the championship game of the 4A state finals for Libertyville. But you look at Chase Lockwood, who was also an All Stater for us. And then you look at their entire staff, the Brady Bunicks of the world. They went about 10 deep, and I want to say only one of the arms that threw for them on the entire year had an ERA above a 1.5. Looking at their year-end stats. So, I want to
Drew,
say
can
the
I hop
team
in?
ERA was a 1.1 or a 1 flat.
I have those numbers pulled up. So their team pitching stats at the end of the year: 254 innings, a combined 36-4 record. Give up 64 runs all year. 40 of those were earned. 301 strikeouts, only 92 walks, a 1.1 team ERA, and a sub one WHIP. As a team, they had a .98 WHIP. So as a team for a pitching staff.
So obviously they have talented individuals, towing the rubber for them. But at the same time, I think you have to give some credit there to the catcher. The guy that's logging all the innings behind the plate. And then for him to do what he did offensively, the way he just presented and carried that team in the playoffs, and then to cap it off with a state title. Just extremely, extremely impressive stuff from Quinn Shambo. Very proud that we were able to name him Player of the Year. I think that's going to be one we'll look back on and remember that year and what he meant to Libertyville and the run they made in the playoffs, winning their first ever state title. But I mean, Gavin, you mentioned it. There are, I don't remember an All State, a Player of the Year and All State having this many tough choices. Right at the top of the list, Enzo Infelice for Providence Catholic. He was a guy we talked about a ton. And full disclosure out there to the public, if Providence makes it to state and Enzo, goes off in state, it'd be hard not to give it to him. When it's that close and we're looking at separators, that I think was one of the biggest reasons because Enzo was nails in the playoffs. I know Tyler, you saw him have some huge hits in the supers. I saw him in the sectional final, barrel up 101, right back up the middle. Looked like he was unfazed, and all he did all season was hit. All he's done all his career is hit. So, that was one for me. Another guy I wanted to throw out there because I think he impacted a club just as much as pretty much anybody else on this list is Hayden Bernruder at Triad. What he did on the mound and with the bat was extremely impressive. The numbers were crazy. He didn't throw a ton of innings on the mound because I think early on in the year he was primarily used as a reliever and then transitioned into a starter. But he was striking out two guys an inning, hit for a ton of power, had 9 triples. Um, that's one name that I think was high on the list. And then, Hammett, you called it out before the season. Connor Essenberg was your pick to click for the year. And he had crazy numbers on both sides of the ball, like Bernruder, like a ton of these guys that we're going to be talking about. But they got knocked out first round in the playoffs. And it's one of those things where, if they make a little bit of a run, if he carries them, if he pitches a couple huge games in the playoffs, like it's going to be hard not to give him the award. Shoot, Brandon Shannon and Josh Holst were two guys that we were talking about. I don't know if you guys see anybody else on this list. One guy we were talking about his career numbers just being crazy, Tyler.
Yeah, Fauski.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, like if Naz goes on a huge run and Fauski leads him to state, he's another guy. It would have been really hard not to really pencil him in as player of the year. And I mean, you mentioned Brandon Shannon, like did it all year for McHenry. I was lucky enough; I got to see him pitch a couple times. Watching him pitch in the state state semifinals against Brother Rice, knocks Brother Rice, out of the playoffs essentially, and um watching him pitch that Friday night, it was like, wow, like that's probably pitcher of the year or player of the year. And then you watch Holst the following night in the state finals, does it on the mound, does it with the bat, and it's kind of like, wow, that might be player of the year as well. So it's really hard, and it's probably not a perfect process, but I think it's a great problem to have. I think it speaks to the talent that's in this state, throughout this state, at every corner of this area. So no, that's what I
And
have.
every year is different. There's been years in the past where Owen Murphy cemented himself as player of the year like midway through the year. He had thrown like two perfect games. He like basically set a record with home runs. I think he hit like 18 his senior season and then did what he did on the mound. It was like, okay, there's nobody else that this award should go to than Owen Murphy. And this year, we're all going into the playoffs like, man, this is an open race. So it was just a different dynamic, a different vibe. I definitely think the playoff runs had a big impact in this year's selection. And like I said, those were just a couple names. There's other names that we're going to get through on this list. And